We're here to talk about week 46 in Silicon Valley. Here are the root URLs. We'll explain those at the end. Here's the first data slide. And we talk about the active inventory compared to the 10-year median, the number of offers compared to the 10-year median, the DUI compared to the 10-year median. Then we drop the 10-year median and simply look at the DUI now, the days on market for the long typical seller now, the amount of average seller ask price reductions prior to offer acceptance, the frequency of those seller price reductions. Then we flip over and we look at the buyer, how much the buyer on average overbids a property, the frequency of that overbidding, the appreciation since the last 9 months of 2015, the sold price, not only the median in the middle, like most people follow, but also the 10 percentile on the left and the 90 percentile on the right. That gives you a range of where 80% of the homes are, and then an estimate of the monthly mortgage payments, assuming an 80% loan using the Federal Reserve rate and including taxes and insurance. You can usually get a lower payment than this by shopping around on interest rates. With that, these are the slides that we're going to be going over. If you're watching this earlier than Wednesday, please hit a like button. That does make a huge difference in the amount of views that I get. If you have any comments or questions about how to improve this presentation, please reach out to me via email or phone. If you have any suggestions at all, I'd appreciate it. In fact, a lot of the changes have come from watchers. Here's the first heat map. What this is doing is showing the current active level of inventory compared to the 10-year median. A lack of inventory favors the seller and is pink or red in color, depending on how much it favors the seller. And a surplus of inventory compared to the 10-year median is blue in color because that would tend to favor the buyers. This is the reverse side of the equation where we're looking at the number of offers compared to the 10-year median. Here, a low number of offers favors the buyer, a high number of offers favors the seller. And you can see that there is no areas where we're having a large number of offers. In fact, the highest number I'm seeing is basically in the Atherton area, believe it or not, with 85% of the normal number of offers accepted. Now, this is looking at the active listings to offers ratio. It's called DUI. It's the speed of the marketplace. And again, this is the speed of the marketplace today compared to the speed of the marketplace the same date for the past 10 years. Red in color is a faster marketplace. Blue in color is favoring the buyer and slower in market. And you can see Alameda County is right at 100%. San Mateo County is basically over 100%, and Santa Clara County is a little bit under 100%, but on both sides of 100%. In fact, I would say Santa Clara County now is a little bit over 100%. Now we're getting rid of the comparing it to the 10-year median, and we're looking simply at days of unsold inventory. This is the speed of the marketplace. How fast or how slow is the market going? Basically, anything under 6 weeks, under 42 days, I round that down to 40 days, is what I consider to be a seller's marketplace. Anything from 6 to 11 weeks, which is 77 days, is a balanced marketplace. Above 11 weeks, 78 days and above, is a buyer's marketplace. You can see the only buyer's marketplace is in Atherton, the expensive areas, where they're at 104 days of unsold inventory. Some of the data would appear to be contradictory because with a long number of days of unsold inventory, you would not expect a large number of offers, but it had the highest number of offers at 85%. You have to look at the numbers. That's one of the reasons I have so many data points, is not all the data would be consistent with what you'd expect it to be. So it's best to have more data and have a better understanding. Now we're looking at one of many of my unique features, the long typical seller. How long does it take 75% of the sellers to sell? This gives you a good idea of what's happening in the marketplace without getting skewed by the one seller that has sold after being on the market for 2 years, pulling the average up, but it doesn't pull up the 75th percentile, which is what the long typical seller is. And here again, anything under 3 weeks would be what I consider to be a red hot seller's marketplace. Anything over 7 weeks would be an ice cold buyer's marketplace. The ice cold buyer marketplace is represented basically by the San Mateo County coast. And again, since it's such an interesting characteristic, is The San Mateo expensive areas is at 52 days. So it's just over that 7-week hurdle. So it's starting to favor the buyers. But yet again, as I said, that area is having more offers than any other area compared to their 10-year median. More offers, you'd expect it to be hot, but it's clearly one of the coolest areas. Again, that's sort of the juxtaposition of the data. Now, this is another unique data point, which is how much of the sellers reducing their own asking price before the offer comes in. And this is on average. This is what I call a pretty tight metric. From actually raising their price to a 0.25% reduction, I consider to be a hot seller's marketplace. From a 0.25% reduction to a 0.75% reduction, I consider to be a balanced marketplace. You can see that, some of these numbers, 4% reduction in Atherton may not sound like much, but anything over 2 is saturated blue because we really get there. And you can see that right now, San Mateo County overall is pretty much at a 2% or greater price reduction, which is pretty significant. You come down to Santa Clara County and you can start seeing that, yes, there are some areas at 2, Saratoga, Los Gatos, East San Jose, and even South County, but then we also have a lot of areas that are at 1 or a half. You can start seeing the tightness of the marketplace, and you get down to Alameda County, and a lot of that market there, that county is at 1% price reductions. And the other huge advantage of looking at price reductions is you don't have to wait for escrows to close to see what the market's doing. Also true for 75 percentile of days on marketplace. As soon as the offer gets accepted, that data gets locked in. So it's about 5 weeks earlier or 6 weeks earlier in the process. Now we're looking at how frequently are those price reductions. You can see in Santa Clara County, you got 2 at 24.5%. That does happen. It sets off red flags for me, and I went and checked the data, and it does appear to be accurate. And there's another one down here too in Saratoga, Los Gatos at 24.5 days. Statistical fluctuations. You would not expect to see that kind of duplication of a data point, but it does happen. Anyway, you can see that in Santa Clara County, we're 25% reductions frequency. So 1 in 4 sellers are reducing their own asking price. You go up into San Mateo County and it's basically from 25 to 50%. Atherton again may be right there in the middle at 33%. Roughly 1 in 3 sellers are reducing their price. You go over into Alameda County, and I would say it's less than 1 in 5 sellers are reducing their price. And again, the fewer sellers are reducing their price, the hotter the market would tend to be. The more sellers reducing their price, the bluer the market would be because the more it favors the buyers. Now we're looking at the magnitude of overbidding. So now we have to wait that length of escrow, 5-6 weeks for escrows to close. How much is the overbidding? And again, this is the average overbidding. And you can see a lot of the areas are right around 4% in Santa Clara County. You can see San Mateo County is pretty close to 0, so not much overbidding in San Mateo County. And if you go over into Alameda County, it's around 3%. And then you have the two standouts that we've had for quite a long time, most of 2023, Oakland at 11% and Berkeley Alameda at 17% of the price. So that means for Berkeley, if you're asking $2 million, the typical offer is coming in 17% higher than that, which would be $2,340,000, really roughly, if I'm doing my math right. It's up significantly over the seller's asking price, almost 20% over, almost, not quite. Frequency of overbidding. How common is overbidding? Again, the spread right in Santa Clara County, maybe right around 2/3. San Mateo County, even though there's not really much overbidding in magnitude, almost 50% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. Now, this could be like what I did is rounded up. I think I went up $2,000 in my offer price just to make it quicker to get in there, get the preemptive offer accepted, and it worked. You go over into Alameda County, and it's close to Santa Clara County, but just a little bit less. It looks like we're just looking at the numbers. But again, you can look at the chart, and the pinker the number, the redder the number, the more it favors the sellers. The pinker the number, the more balanced it is. White is a balanced marketplace, and there is no blue. Now we're looking at the appreciation. So this is the long-term financial investment aspect of real estate. Here, the redder the color, the higher the appreciation. What stands out is It's the outlying areas that are having the highest appreciation since 2015. I think this is directly related to COVID. People are assuming they have more flexible work schedules now. They don't have to go into work as often. They're willing to commute further. Those properties became more desirable compared to where they had been. Discount for being inconvenient commutes got smaller, so they have a higher appreciation. And then the west side that was convenient to the job centers have the lowest appreciation because they've lost that premium for being close to the work, so therefore they've had less appreciation in the recent years. Again, another thing that's unique for this data set is instead of just following the median, which is the middle number, I also follow the 10 percentile, the cheapest that you'd expect to find in an area, as well as the 90 percentile, the more expensive. So now by looking at the numbers, you know that 40% of the homes are between the number on the left and the number in the middle, the median, and another 40% of the homes are between the middle and the number in the middle and the number on the right-hand side. So 80% of your homes are in that range. If you're below the number on the right, there's going to be less than 1 in 10 listings that meet your criteria just on price, let alone location, square footage, and things of that. It gives you a sandwich, it gives you price ranges in each one of the 20 different micro market areas in Silicon Valley. Here's a summary of what we've gone over. You have the active listings compared to the number of the 10-year median, the number of offers compared to the 10-year median, the DUI compared to the 10-year median. Now you leave behind the 10-year median and look at just the DUI now, the long typical seller, how long is it taking to sell the property, seller's price reduction average, and then the frequency of those price reductions. Then you wait till escrows close and you have the average magnitude of overbidding, as well as the frequency of that overbidding. Then you have the appreciation since 2015. You have the price, not only the median, but the 10 and 90 percentile. And then you go over here and you introduce the payments. Granted, this is a very rough number, but it's what I do is I take an 80% loan. I use the Federal Reserve number for this nation. I'm using PITI so that you have the total payment. So you get a range of either your monthly outflow to purchase the properties in those different areas, or you come over here and you find out the price, or you come over here on the left-hand side and pick the micro market area you want to purchase in and see what the market conditions are going to be. Now, this slide is looking at what the current inventory is in the purple, the offers in the orange, and the days of unsold inventory in the gray compared to the 10-year median, which is what I call the typical. You can see inventory is down at 87% of where you'd expect it to be. So we're 13% fewer transactions than you'd expect to be having based on the 10-year median. But the number of offers is down at 72%. You're having a greater lack of offers than you are of inventory. And notice how inventory has been growing pretty rapidly. And basically it started out maybe right around September 1st, because the faint gray line is going to be your quarter. So that's going to be July 1st, and it's to the right of that. So that makes it about September the 1st onwards. Inventory has been on a skyrocketing increase. And one of the things I do is I look back over the previous years, and you have little jumps of inventory like this that are short in duration, but you have long periods of going up. But this is one of the steeper, longer durations. I would say this one in 2018 is probably longer, but it's the same type of thing, which means that going into 2024, we very well could have the pattern that we had going into 2019. Anyway, days of unsold inventory, because the rising increase of inventory is also increasing and now is slower than it typically is. And we're now at 10% above the level of the DUI you'd be normally expecting. So the speed of the marketplace is 10% slower. This slide is up here only for really the bottom line. And I'll point out basically earlier this year, we were having the record lowest number of sales in the past 10 years, as well as the past 25. Recently, it's been a 9 and 24, or in some cases 23. But come back and look at some of these previous record lows, which were just last year, and see how close we are. This week, we're at 1707 versus 1612, so you're within 100. Last week, we were basically right at 100. The week before that, we were only off by 19. That's 1% roughly of the 1,700 that offers accepted, and you're only 1% above that. So you're pretty close to being at a record low. The 4 weeks ago, you're only 30 off, 28 off. The week before that, you're only 17 off. So my point is, even though it looks like we're improving because now we're no longer the worst year, we're pretty close to that worst year. So the lack of offers is still a concern that I have. Now what we're looking at is the PITI of Silicon Valley, which is putting all those 20 areas in a blender, blending it all up and looking at what the payments are. So the cheapest payment you can buy a single family home is right around $7,000 a month. The typical buyer's spending around 12,500, and those that are buying the more expensive homes are approaching 26,000. And it's very likely someone buying the more expensive homes is not doing an 80% loan, so they wouldn't be having a $26,000 a month payment, but that would be what it would be if you kept the criteria the same. Now we're looking at a 35-day distribution that's updated every week. And initially, I'm jumping a month at a time. So we go from 12 months to 3 months. And then when we hit 3 months, we go to weekly. So we go 13 weeks, 12 weeks, 11 weeks, etc. And to get monthly data, since it's not monthly jumps, it's going to be 4 or 5 weeks. I try to pick the closest week for the same day of the month. And what we're going to do is we're going to step through and watch the slide initially jump down, and then we're going to go up. And then we're going to right there hit the peak about 6 months ago. And now we're on weekly data, and you can see there's some bounce, but the trend is downward. And because the trend was down here at the blue line just last year, I would expect as you're starting to see the last line, the purple line and the green line is down quite a bit from the week before. There's the week before, and now it's gone down to there. I am expecting that to come down quite a bit. I'm not expecting it to make it all the way down to where the blue dotted line is, but it will come down quite a bit more over the next 5, 6 weeks. Now we're flipping over and looking at the same thing on the overbid. So you have the weekly distribution. Now remember, this needs closing sale price, and so it's delayed by 5, 6 weeks. So now the bottom was about 10 months ago instead of only a month ago, and you can right there was the peak, but you can see you're very close together and not really changing. But now, right in the last couple weeks, there might have been a slight drift down, and I expect that drift down to continue a little bit, but I don't expect it to be as noticeable. And it's just, sellers adjust their price and then buyers are coming in. Now what we're looking at is the active inventory over time. The gray line is the typical line. So this is that 10-year median that I would expect. The blue line in the case of inventory is the 90 percentile. A lot of inventory favors the buyer. So that's the blue line up here, the 90 percentile. Few listings favor the seller, which is why it's a red line. So the least number of you'd expect is 1775. We're at 1874, so 100 listings more than you'd expect, but quite a bit below the 2157 that would be typical, and way below the 2608 that would be the most you'd expect. We're towards the least amount of inventory, but we still have inventory at a reasonable level. And you can see that we've been basically following the red line for the marketplace, which indicates that we've been, doing sort of what the market would do in a hot marketplace. Now we're doing the same thing with the number of offers, and you can see that we've been below the blue line. So we've been lower than you would expect based on the past 10-year median. And right now we're essentially right at the median. It's 1698 and we're at 1707. So we're just over the 10%. So we have an extra 9 more than the least you'd expect. You'd expect to be way up here at 2,300 and 2,400. So we're doing 700 transactions less than you'd expect. That's almost a third of the marketplace is missing from the real estate volume and from the real estate industry. Now you're looking at days of unsold inventory, and even though the market is fast, and I will acknowledge the market's fast, welcome to Silicon Valley, we're slower than typical. Typical's at 35 days and we're at 38 days. Would you notice that? Actually, yeah, 3 days is fairly significant. In a hot marketplace, you'd be down here at 3 weeks. We're at 5 weeks instead of 3 weeks, but we're nowhere near 6 weeks for a cool, slow marketplace. And one of the things that I'll point out is, here in Silicon Valley, it's unique to anywhere in the country because a lot of the people that talk about national data are talking about anything under about 3 months of inventory is a supply restraint marketplace. Silicon Valley is rarely in the 3 month level. Yes, we've been at the 3 month level when we were in 2007. But here you can go back to 2019, and the most you ever had, which was just for a short period of time at the end of the year, left over because it's, remember, the lag of 5 weeks at 70 days. You come down here and you say typical is 50 days. We're rarely over 2 months of inventory, and we're sell inventory, and we have sold inventory at lower levels of inventory. The least I've ever seen, and it was only for a short period of time, was 5.6 days of unsold inventory, and it was in Cupertino and Sunnyvale in the heat of the marketplace. Yes, you can get down very low. People that are claiming that it's constraint driven at 3 months. Real estate is local. You have to look at what's going on locally. You can't apply those numbers to Silicon Valley. Here's looking at the DUI compared to the typical. So if you were having a completely typical year, you'd be right on the black horizontal line. You can see that we're at the 110%. We're a little bit above, which favors the buyer. Now we're looking at the long typical seller. This is a good benchmark for those folks that think statisticians like to make the numbers say whatever they want. This is simply the time on the marketplace of the long typical seller. Typically, that's just over 2 weeks. Right now, we're over a little over 3 weeks, but we're way below the 5 weeks that would represent a typical marketplace or a cool marketplace. So you can see a cool marketplace and a typical marketplace are very close together. Now we can see that we're only 2/3. So sellers are selling their property 33% faster than they typically do right now. This is your ask price reductions. Here you're favoring the buyer. Price reductions are at 1.5%. In a typical marketplace, you're only taking 1.1% price reduction. In a cool marketplace, you're taking a 2.3% price reduction. It's the vertical separation between these lines. Roughly, you're halfway in between. You're a little closer to the typical, but you're between a cool marketplace and a typical marketplace. And the reason these lines curve, that's the cycle of real estate in Silicon Valley. So you can see price reductions disappear right around April the 1st. Then they start reappearing and they sort of maximize right around the October 1st timeframe, a little bit on each side, a month or two on each side of October 1st, and then up they go again. This allows you to have some idea of what the market's likely to do. You can see how predictable it is. Here's now looking at the largest 10% of the sellers that are doing the price reductions. So you put all your price reductions together, look at the sellers that are taking the biggest price reduction, and what is the level of that 10th percentile seller, the seller that's taking the 10th percentile largest reductions. Right now, it's basically at a 15% price reduction. The worst we really expect this time is a 16%. So the sellers that are taking the biggest price reductions are taking a bigger price reduction almost as much as you'd ever expect them to be. And you can see how much that's increased just since October 1st. Because remember, these vertical lines in the back are your quarters. So first quarter, April 1st, second quarter, July 1st, and third quarter, October 1st. So since October 1st, and it was actually a little bit after October 1st, the number went from basically somewhere around 89.5% down to 84.5%. So those sellers are taking a 5% greater price reduction just in the last month. Here is the 10 percentile reduction. And then right now, the average price reduction of the 10th percentile seller, 26% greater now than it typically is for this time of the year. Now we're looking at the frequency of price reductions. We're right here at 19.4%. The sellers are typically taking 20%, or the sellers are typically taking price reductions. So 1 in 5, you're basically right on top of it. In a hot marketplace, you're down as little as 1 in 10 sellers taking a price reduction. And in a cool marketplace, that's 1 in 3 sellers are taking a price reduction. This is the average overbid for the seller. So now we're looking at all the sellers. This is what the buyers come in at. Right now, they're overbidding by 5.3%. Typically for this time of the year, it's 4.2%. And again, remember, this is reflecting what the market was doing 5, 6 weeks ago. So this number will probably continue to decrease. And you can see that it typically decreases at the end of the year, all the way till about 5 weeks after the end of the year. And then it turns around and we get into that spring rush and prices jump, which is one of the reasons why it's really advantageous if you're a buyer to get off the fence and buy a house before the end of the year. And I'd be happy to work with you if you're interested in doing that. Here's the frequency of overbidding. Right now, 64% of the buyers are coming in and asking price. In a hot marketplace, it's 75%. Typical is 60%, and a cool marketplace is just under 50%. Here is the long-term typical median price for Silicon Valley. It's on log paper. The straight line through there is roughly the best slope. And you can see at the end of the year, basically at this time of the year, right there, because there's the end of the year, you start falling below the line. We were on the line, now you're falling below. That will tend to continue to fall below again until right after the first of the year. And again, this is a lagging indicator, so it's what the market did 5 weeks earlier. So we're approaching the low point in the calendar year right now. Now, yeah, last year was quite a bit lower down here, but this year, we're going to come down somewhere right around, probably somewhere around 1475, maybe, if I had to take a wild guess. And here we're looking at the number of active listings. So now we're breaking it down. Instead of looking at Silicon Valley as a whole, we're trying to look at each one of the counties. So here you have San Mateo County, the smallest county, and its inventory is dropping off fairly rapidly. And you can see that it drops off every year. Santa Clara County is the next, and its inventory is dropping off, and it typically drops off. Alameda County was rising up and then increasing, and then it flipped over and it's coming down. It normally is also dropping. All 3 counties are typically dropping at this time of the year. It's just the holidays. Real estate is an optional event, and when holidays and social obligations get in the way, people do those optional social events and put real estate on the back burner. Here's the number of offers accepted. Really hasn't started dropping yet, but you can see we start to expect that drop to really hammer in. When do I expect it? Next week will be in a little bit, but the week after. Right now, a lot of the sellers are on the marketplace. The buyers are still out looking because we're still almost a week away from Thanksgiving. Next week, the buyers are not going to be putting in their offer in. The data that comes out next Friday is reflecting of what happened this weekend. So it will drop a little bit, but not dramatically. 2 Saturdays from now, I expect to be on this very steep part of this drop with the number of offers just plummeting. Here's your days of unsold inventory. You can see that it varies a little bit more, but the general trend is up at the end of the year. But you can come back in 2021 and it went down. People were anticipating the 2022 appreciation to come into the 2021 marketplace. It almost looks like we're doing that right now. It's a little early to tell. All 3 counties are in the downward direction. Here's the time on the marketplace, which is still increasing. So sellers are taking longer to sell their property. San Mateo County is taking the longest at 37 days. Alameda County is next at 27 days, and Santa Clara County is the fastest at 3 weeks, 21 days. Now we're looking at the magnitude of the seller's ask price adjustment. This is how much the seller is reducing their asking price. You can see it's a pretty tight number because in San Mateo County, the sellers reduced their asking price by 2.3% on average. You can see that Alameda County and Santa Clara County are very close together, and that number is basically 98.8. So in those 2 counties, the sellers are only doing a 1.2% price reduction, fairly minor adjustment in the price. This is the frequency of those price reductions. You can see Santa Clara County only 17%, Alameda County almost 19%, and then you go up into San Mateo County and it's 25%. So 50% more of the sellers are reducing their price in San Mateo County. 17%, 50% of 17% is 8. 8 on top of 17 is the 25. But still, it's only 1 in 4 sellers are reducing their price, so that means 3/4 of the sellers come on the marketplace and get their house sold at their, not at their asking price, but without reducing their asking price. This is the overbids for the 3 counties. San Mateo County is at the lowest, just under 3%. Clara County is next at just over 4%. And Alameda County is doing surprisingly well at almost 8% overbid. If you're asking $1 million in Alameda County, it's very typical to expect $1,080,000 in when the offers come in. Here's the frequency of overbiddings. In Alameda County is at 72% of the sellers, almost 3/4 of the sellers are getting over their asking price. In Santa Clara County, it's 6 in 10 sellers are getting over their asking price, 61%, and in San Mateo County, it's 57%. Santa Clara County and San Mateo County are surprisingly close together on the frequency, given the difference in the magnitude of overbidding. Now we're looking at the appreciation. Alameda County and San Mateo County are neck and neck. San Mateo County has been going up recently, and Alameda County has been coming down. Just a few weeks ago, there was a dramatic difference in their rate of appreciation. Now they're right on top of one another. Santa Clara County is also coming down, but doing the best at 184%. That's 84% appreciation since the last 9 months of 2015. Now we're looking at what a lot of people like to follow is the sold price. It's really a lagging indicator. It doesn't really tell you where the market's going. But you can see that Santa Clara County has dropped down this last week at 1765. San Mateo County is at 1905, and Alameda County is at 1230. All 3 counties are down just this last week, it looks like. Here's the same numbers just on regular paper. The previous was on log paper. Here's the monthly payment based on the county. So in Alameda County, you're basically at $10,000 a month. Santa Clara County, you're at $14,300. And in San Mateo County, you're at $15,400. Here's the actual numbers for some of the key data points that we've been talking about, broken down by each county as well as Silicon Valley as a whole. Now we're going to be leaving Silicon Valley and we're going to be talking about the Greater Bay Area. And the advantage of looking at the Greater Bay Area is it gives you a better sense of what's happening in the local marketplace. And the Greater Bay Area is sort of irrelevant, but it influences Silicon Valley. And that's why I go ahead and look at it. We're starting off with the numbers in case there's some favorite numbers. And one of the things I want to point out is historically, San Francisco and Marin are the most expensive counties. And you can see they're both under 1,700. And you now look at both Santa Clara County and San Mateo County are more expensive than San Francisco or Marin. Here is the Greater Bay Area activity level. So how much inventory is there in each of the 5 regions? You can see Silicon Valley is sort of in the middle of the pack with 2,000 inventory. You can see the smaller areas. These are smaller counties. It's not that they have dramatically less inventory. They're just smaller geographical areas. Number of offers, again, the Central Coast and San Francisco cities have smaller geographical areas, so they have less inventory or less offers. Now here you're starting to see some separation because you can see that a lot of this last several years, these lines were right on top of one another. So Central Valley is starting to see fewer offers accepted. Alameda County is still doing reasonably well, but Silicon Valley is still on fire with being the area that has the most number of offers accepted. And this number, you just look at the number and you would say that it's a bigger area and therefore it should have a higher number. But again, look at how close the numbers have been for the last 10 years. To have this separation is starting to be significant. It's saying that Silicon Valley is staying hotter than the surrounding regions of the Northern California area. Here's your days on unsold inventory. So now you can really start seeing it. Silicon Valley is at 38 days. So all of Silicon Valley inventory would theoretically sell out in 38 days, where your next closest is up here basically at 57, 257s and a 56. A lot of the areas are right shy of 2 months to sell out their inventory. And then the Central Coast is the slowest at 2.5 months, 74 days. Now we're looking at the time on the marketplace for the long typical seller, the 75th percentile seller. Silicon Valley is the fastest at 22 days, 3 weeks. Central Valley is next at 31 days, a full month. The cities is next at 37 days, 5 weeks. And then you have the North Bay and the Central Coast next at basically 45 and 47 days, just shy of, call it 6.5 weeks. Now we're looking at the price reductions. This is how much the sellers are reducing their price. You can see in Silicon Valley and the Central Valley, it's the least at about, it looks like it's 98.5%, a 1.5% reduction for the Silicon Valley and the Central Coast. Then you jump down to the North Bay at 2.2%, 2.4% for the cities, and 2.8% for the Central Coast. You can see Silicon Valley and Central Valleys, the high-tech areas that people are commuting to for affordability, are doing the best right now. But then you have the North Bay, where people are going sort of for the wine country as well as for a commute into Silicon Valley. Then you have San Francisco and Marin. It's really been hurting in a lot of ways, having the second to most price reductions, and then the Central Coast having the most price reductions. Here's the frequency of those price reductions. Silicon Valley at 19% having the fewest. Then you jump up to basically right 30 to 34% of the sellers. So right around 1/3 of the sellers are taking price reductions in most of the areas, or three out of 10 sellers are doing price reductions in most of the areas. And in Silicon Valley, it's only 2 out of 10. Significantly different marketplace. Here is where the buyers come in and who's overbidding. It's sort of surprising to see the cities doing so close to Silicon Valley. I would have expected it to be down quite a bit, but you can see how it's just really improved. So I don't know if that's sellers in San Francisco and Marin got more realistic, but boom, big improvement after a big drop off. And, is that really the market changing or just statistical fluctuation? There are fewer homes in that area, so you have more bounce. And that's one of the reasons why I came up with micro market areas, is trying to group very similar type homes together so statistical fluctuations weren't a significant factor. Then you have the North Bay, Central Valley, and the Central Coast having the least amount of overbidding. In fact, on average, in the Central Coast, buyers are coming in under the asking price. This is the frequency of overbidding. The most is Silicon Valley with a little bit shy of 2/3, but very close to 2/3. San Francisco Marin at 57%, North Bay at 47%, Central Valley at 44%, and Central Coast at 32%. This is the appreciation, and this is where you really start seeing Marin and San Francisco hurting, where they've only had 35% appreciation since 2015. Surprisingly, Central Coast has had the most appreciation at 96%, followed by the Central Valley at 86%. Silicon Valley is actually in third place at 76%. Look at the shoot up, though, in the Central Coast. I think it's simply that more homes in the Central Coast area have been selling along the coastline than along the 101 corridor. That brings up your current price, which would tend to bring up the appreciation. That's a market shift. That's statistical fluctuation, not real property values, which is one of the reasons why it's dangerous to look at median price for a county, let alone a larger area. Here is the median sold price. So now you're looking at what the prices are, and you can see how the Central Coast has shot up a lot in the last couple weeks, but it also dropped a lot in the few weeks before that. You can see there's a lot more fluctuation, and the fluctuation on the Central Coast appears to be getting worse, because you come back here and yeah, there's bounce, but look at the magnitude of the bounce now. San Francisco Marin did a big, huge bounce, and the other regions have been fairly constant in their approach. Again, it's not surprising that the smallest two regions are having the most statistical fluctuation. Here is the estimated payments for the same regions. You can see that Marin, San Francisco is the highest, and this is directly related to price. $13,000 monthly payment. Silicon Valley, 12,300. Central Coast, call it 9,900. North Bay, 6,300, and the Central Valley has the most affordable payments at 4,400. With that, we've been talking about Silicon Valley real estate market, week number 46. These are archived on YouTube. You can go to YouTube / Silicon Valley real estate data, and you'll get to the archive. Or if you want to type in less, type in tinyurl.com / SVREMG. If you add 2023 to the end of the green root URL, you get to the presentation Saturday morning, 9 o'clock live. I will be on next Saturday. The handout is up, so you add in the letter H right after the root URL before the date to get today's 58-page handout. That's the vast majority of these slides. I actually went over 103 slides, so you're getting a little over half of them. I didn't do the duplicate type of slides is what I subtracted. So you got all the substance. And then if you want to look at any particular archive, you can go directly by putting in the year, month, date code, or you can go to the YouTube channel. I'm Richard Calhoun, working with buyers or sellers here in Silicon Valley, and happy to work with you if you have any real estate needs, or if you have a question about the statistical analysis as I'm doing, and very happy to engage. Some of the improvements that I've made here are from suggestions from consumers. So if there's a metric that you think is valuable, reach out to me either on YouTube or directly, and happy to talk to you about it. And with that, I'm open for any questions. Not seeing anyone unmuting their mics. Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Bye for now.